9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everybody. I hope everyone is doing great. This is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. I am here with you, and we're getting... my puppy's going crazy for a second there. Don't know why. That's a brand new thing for him. So we're here with you today, and I hope everyone's having a great day. We've got a lot of things that are going on, a lot of things to talk about, And I want to make sure that when we're talking about them, we're going to see the best answers that we can. Because it's sensitive. It's really sensitive information that we're going to be talking about. And I am hoping that the results for everyone will be positive, that we'll have a great answer, that we'll be able to have a great conversation about really, really serious issues. That's the whole point of it. I mean, that's why it's on Saturdays, we spend 2 hours talking directly with you about the things that matter, about the issues that are affecting you and how you feel about them. And that's why we're here, because that's what this is all about. And by the way, I know a couple people have mentioned the volume was a little low. Please let me know if the volume is still low. It should be better in the recording. It's the joy of being live. I don't hear back the same way that you guys do. So please let me know if you're hearing it low or if anything's like going on like that. And we already have Mary Brockman here with us. Hello, Mary. And I hope that she can hear me all right. It is low. Okay, it is low. Let's try. Bear with me, Miriam. Couple of things I'm going to tweak here for you so you can hear me a little bit better. And give me, how's that? Oh, wow, that's coming across. How's that? Is that coming across a little better? It is better? Okay. Yeah, it's just coming across really loud in my ear, so bear with me. For me, it's just like, wow, it's huge in my ear, but I want to balance that. So that should still be good for you. Okay. And that's Mary Brockman, who's checking out the show and listening with us. And I always love your feedback, guys. You all make the difference. That's why I love you, because you guys are perfect. You're a great audience, and that's always important to me. Now, just so you guys know, and Mary is our bouncer, so if there's any misbehaving, any comments like that we should be aware of, well, she's going to take care of that for us, just so you know. And I always look forward to everyone that we can to be online and to be involved in the show. And I'll listen to, and Mary, please make sure your feedback's in there too, because I want to hear what you have to say. So let's get started with a couple of the simple things. There were a lot of things I wanted to talk about today. There were a lot of things. I wanted to talk about Beto O'Rourke, the 2020 presidential campaign, the importance of gender and identity in our politics, and leading the charge on the 2020 political race, as well as the 2019 race on local level, on state and national level. How we see this all across the nation. And it is an important question. And we're going to get to it. We will get to it. But before we get to that, one of the things that I want to talk about, because there was just one of several things that I wanted to talk about, some of the bills that have been going on in Congress, H.R. 1, H.R. 6. I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening out there, and they deserve attention. The sanctuary cities. We now have yet another sanctuary city for the Second Amendment, not for illegal aliens, not for illegal aliens trying to come into the nation and gain rights and freedoms that they don't necessarily deserve. No. We're talking about for the Second Amendment. Americans standing up through city and city, county and county, over 120 counties, right now 5 cities, across the United States that are saying, hey, we want to protect our Second Amendment rights. We have the right to protect ourselves from the government. We have the right to protect ourselves from criminals and the deranged, which is a beautiful thing, I think. And I'm a well-known advocate of the Second Amendment, so I'm not going to say it's not a great thing when it is. And we need to do this. And it's something that we need to talk about. But what we saw is that instead, the story that everyone has been talking about and deserves to be talked about is the mass shooting in New Zealand. And it's always devastating to hear about the Second Amendment, to hear about these mass shootings. And it doesn't matter whether it's in the United States or it's in Norway or it's in New Zealand or in England. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a mass stabbing, if it's a bomb attack, if it's like throughout the entire Middle East. I mean, this happens in Israel all the time where we have suicide bombers. These are all the same thing, whether it's a knife, it's a bomb, if there's someone with a car driving through crowds like in France, whether it's a mass shooting like in New Zealand. These are horrible events. These are terrible things that should never happen. And we should make sure that when they do happen, we have to denounce them. We have to denounce the people that did them. And we have to understand that there is evil in this world. That is just a fact. And you can't legislate evil in the world. I wish that we could. I wish it was as simple as saying, hey, I'm going to get rid of this evil in the world. Oops, sorry. There was just that little thing in the corner over there that's just driving me nuts. Anyway, and I wish it was as simple as saying we can just get rid of the evil in the world. I really do. But it's not real. You can't just legislate the evil away from the world. If we could, we would have done it a long time ago. If it was just about firearms, there's over 1,000 laws in the United States on firearms. There's over 126 laws that were added in 2018 since the Parkland shooting. And that includes red flag laws and safe storage laws and everything else throughout the nation. And there are, in many countries, most people don't even have the rights that we have here in the United States. They're starting off at a lower level. They have less access to firearms. They have less ability to own a firearm legally. So it's even more restricted. I mean, in England, you haven't had the right to own a firearm since the 1400s, if I remember it correctly. So I think it's 1432. And that's very important to understand. So even with all of our freedoms and all of the restrictions automatically built in nations around the world, evil still happens. Bad people find firearms. They make bombs. They use cars. They use box cutters. They use, in China, swords. And they commit evil on a large scale. This is the reality of the world that we live in. And a law doesn't change that. It just doesn't. I wish that we could say that it did. I wish that there was a law that instantly every criminal will go, oh, I'm going to go out and kill 20 people today. But I can't. Because there's a law. Darn. I wish that was the case. That would be the best thing that we could see. And I don't know anyone who wouldn't support something that would do that. Except that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And that's just, it's sad. It's a reality. And I understand that in a time in our nation where people are so defined by the idea that their feelings are more important than facts, the fact is important in this case. That no matter how you feel about a firearm, a bomb, a car, a box cutter, no matter how you feel about it, the reality is, and the fact is, that evil people will go out and kill many people with those weapons. The deranged will go out and harm people. And we need to be able to defend ourselves against that. I think that's one of the most important things. I know a lot of people are looking at it and have a very different point of view about this. Now, let me go to, and I want to bring up, and obviously I'm looking for comments from everyone from, whoops, I don't have my phone in front of me, okay. But all the different formats out there. In particular, I'm looking at Facebook right now. But I want to talk about, some of the things that we're seeing out there, because there's just so much to talk about in this. Now, something a lot of people, let's clear some of the facts up that people have been talking about New Zealand and the laws and why they're changing their laws. And we've got a lot of people who've said a lot of things. So let's start off with the fact that, and I'm looking this up off of Wikipedia, it's one of many, many sources that I have been looking over the last couple days that I've been doing on this story. And it finds out that there are only 250,000 people in New Zealand who are able to have a firearm. Only 250,000. That they've been increasing the restrictions on guns since the 1990s. And let's also keep in mind, they have had mass shootings before. This is not new. And they had the Armagh massacre in 1990, the Scottish Dublin and Australian Port Arthur massacres in 1996. Were they at the same level as what we're seeing right now? No, absolutely not. They weren't at this degree. But to say that they've never had that before would be ridiculous. To say that the United States is the only place where we see mass shootings is ridiculous, because it's not true. We see that across the world. There are many people have already had that. And like Mary has just mentioned, we're headed in that direction where people are just going to restrict everything in the United States. But it doesn't work. The United States is maybe, and Mary's mentioning, the United States may be slower to that trend, but at the same time, we are on that trend. We are going into that direction. And you're right, Mary. But let me make this point clear. We've seen that in New Zealand, where you do not have an innate and inherent right to a firearm to protect yourself from bad people and bad government, that is not an innate right in New Zealand. And they further have been restricting people for over 20 years, almost 30 years now, on their ability to be able to have a firearm for whatever reason once they do have it. Okay? So that's important, because what that's telling us is, even with these extreme actions, even with restriction of semi-automatic rifles and shotguns, and limiting the capacity of the firearms, people still are affected by bad people, by mass murders, by people with an evil intent. I mean, look at the grounds to carry or use guns. People in New Zealand, you need a proper, lawful, and sufficient purpose to be able to have and use a firearm. Okay? To have and use. So you could even have the firearm, but if you don't have what is legally considered the proper purpose, you can't use that firearm. That's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy. That's kind of scary. For an American, think about that. That means that you could have the ability to protect yourself and your family, and you can't do it. They won't let you do it. So that's one of the scarier things about that. Oops, I jumped a little bit there. Sorry. And that scares me. That scares me a lot, because that's not right. And as Mary mentions, criminals will always be able to get guns. And she's right. They are. And they always do. And when they don't, as an example, here in New York State, 2.5 weeks ago, there was 4 former Boy Scouts that went and made bombs. so that they can go to a city called Islamberg, and they were planning to have a mass murder incident there. So take away all the guns. Criminals make bombs. We've seen, think of France. People were using trucks to drive through crowds. You don't make people safer by trying to take away a weapon. People have taken away, in England, yes, they don't have firearms. Have you compared the knife crimes? We did that a couple of weeks ago. A couple of weeks ago, it was the middle of February, we actually did. It was right before I went over to CPAC, and we did the article. And we did the research on the number of knife crimes, and in particular knife murders, in the United Kingdom versus the United States. And actually, it's proportionately higher, the number of knife crimes versus the number of gun crimes in the United States. You would need, especially considering the population of England is about 1/6. And I'm trying to remember the article right now, but it was about 1/6 the population of the United States. It takes up 1/8 the landmass, or actually the size of California, for about 1/6 the number of people, and yet the proportion, as I recall, of the knife crimes versus the gun crimes, way out of whack. It's just ridiculous. And that's because evil isn't restricted to a type of weapon to commit these crimes. And we have to keep that in mind. Because in the world today, there seems to be this idea that has been brewing and running around saying that, well, if we can just get rid of the weapons, we'll be good. That the bad people won't do bad things. All we have to do is take away these certain types of things. We're going to take away these types of weapons. And that's not, I wish I could say it was naive, but that isn't. It's incredulous. It isn't credible, because we're assuming that just because you don't like this or that, again, a sword, a car, a box cutter, a bomb, or a firearm, just because you don't like it doesn't mean someone else is going to stop using it, even if you put a law out there. And we already have the laws in place. It's not like this is a brand new thing. In countries, hundreds of years, these laws already exist. It didn't stop them. More laws won't stop them either. Not when they're targeting the wrong thing. If you're targeting the weapon being used, you're not targeting the person using the weapon. And we just don't hear this enough across the major news media. I've been talking about this for literally a decade. I've had, a dozen, 2 speaking engagements on the Second Amendment alone. And I've been covered by news, and I've been on talk radio, and I've been a featured speaker talking about this very same thing. And over a decade, it has not changed. The laws are being focused more and more on the weapon that is being used, whether it's a firearm or a knife or anything else. And we're losing sight of the fact that the problem isn't the weapon, it's the person. It is the criminal or that criminally deranged individual and their actions. That's the problem. That's where we have the issue. That's what we need to address. And we don't need to bother, especially in the United States, the 99.999, literally 99.999%, actually may even be higher than that, of lawful Americans with firearms are not the problem. Why are we treating them as if they are? Criminals do not get gun licenses. Criminals do not go out and try and have the state approve them making a purchase. Criminals don't worry about what the magazine size they're using is or the type of bullet. Remember in the 80s, there were the cop killer bullets? Criminals didn't care. They used those bullets even if they were illegal. So these were the cop killer bullets were the bullets that would be able to go through a vest of a police officer, and it was intentionally meant to kill police officers. This was back in the 80s, mid 80s, early 90s. And it was a big thing, and they were made illegal. And I believe they still are illegal. And yet criminals have still used those types of those bullets. And that's it. And, you know, Mary mentions the problem is sin. And it's and yes, it is the sin of murder. And it's the execution. It's the person who is executing that sin, that person who is making that choice, that conscious choice to murder. And that's something you can't legislate out of people. I wish we could. You can't. What you can do is legislate the protection of people, to allow people and encourage people to be able to protect themselves. Now, that's something that a lot of people don't think about. And I think it's a very important part of the issue. And I'm going to go into that. But first, we're going to have a very short break because we're coming up just on our first break here. And I want to take a sip of my coffee that I was just making. And then we'll go forward with everything else. So with that said, we're going to jump on over, take a quick little break here. Oops. There we go. And listen to Matthew Cornwell as he sings Picture Perfect. It's his latest song. And we know Matt, and he's a great singer, and we hope you enjoy this. And then we'll be back in just a moment.
We always got a problem. All I ever tried to do was give you help. Used to wonder if you love me. Now I wonder if you even love yourself. Can you tell me why we're yelling? We're at the mall and all these kids don't need to hear all the secrets you've been telling. You said I wanna be clear, sometimes we fall out of line.
Sometimes we ain't in the right mind. Sometimes we fall out of line. Everything ain't always picture perfect. Sometimes we ain't in the right. Everything ain't always picture perfect. Everything ain't always picture perfect. Picture perfect. Everything ain't always picture perfect.
Yeah. Here you go, you getting started. I say I love you, you won't even say it back. Why'd I bring you to this party? That dress is hitting, but your attitude so whack. It's been getting so much harder. I start to wonder now if you can even see. You gon' leave me broken hearted. That's when you said I wanna be free. Sometimes we fall out of line.
Sometimes we ain't in the right mind. Sometimes we fall out of line. Everything ain't always picture perfect. Sometimes we ain't in the right. Everything ain't always picture perfect.
All right, everybody, we are back. That's right, we are back. Oops, hang on. background noise there. Wait a minute. There we go. Sorry about that. And just to make sure, just want to fix that so we don't have that bothering us in the background again. So again, I'm happy to be here with you. This is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, on the ever popular No Soundbites Allowed podcast. We got right into it last time in the last segment because I was just so excited. And I want to talk about this issue about New Zealand because it is so much bigger than just the one aspect that people see or are hearing on the news media. And we're enjoying this on the Exceptional Conservative Network. Sorry, it's still new to me to bring that in and talk about it, but we're very happy about that. And it's a great program. You get to hear the Exceptional Conservative himself, Ken McClinton, on the show at 9 p.m. With all of his guests, and we're going to have many guests coming in next week, and we'll be talking about that. But I like Saturdays because Saturdays are just with you, me talking to you and the public, and getting your feedback directly. Something that we don't see enough is, especially in the news media, with all of the commentary that is out there. I mean, that's pretty much all that MSNBC does. It's pretty much all that CNN does. It's all commentary all time. But what they don't do enough of, and it's great to have pundits. I mean, I'm a pundit. I'm a political commentator. And it's great for us to have our voices. But it means nothing if we're not hearing from the public directly. And it's very important because we get in a vacuum. I mean, I talk with politicians all the time. I've been doing it for over a decade. I talk to people who are making laws or influencing laws, people who are in the news. They're not always normal people. They don't always have normal thoughts. You talk to, as an example, if you were to talk to Senator Schumer, which is almost impossible to do, but Senator Schumer, he's been in politics for over 30 years. He doesn't live the life of an average guy going out and doing an electrician, a plumber, someone who's at a call center. He's not doing that life. He has no idea what that's about. It's just not part of his reality, nor is that the scope of people who are surrounding him. So he has no clue what that's about. And when you talk to people just like that, you lose track of what real people are thinking and what real people are doing. And that makes a big difference because it changes the way. And that's why it's so important, for me at the very least, but I think for the entire media, is to say, hey, let's stop for a second, go back and say, hey, what are real people thinking about this? What are real people doing about this? Because I think that's very important. Instead, though, what we're seeing a lot, and this is coming out of this event in New Zealand, is something that's a bit disturbing. Not only the fact that people are trying to attribute this guy. The first issue is people are saying, well, we have to get rid of firearms and that will make us safe. That's your first lie. That's a lie. As I said in the first 20 minutes of the show, if you're telling yourself or someone is telling you that all you have to do is get rid of the firearms and you'll be safe and everything will be okay, they're lying to you. That's the first lie that they're giving to you. And that's a problem because they are absolutely wrong. Absolutely, positively wrong. So we can't go by that. So what can we do? What's one of the other big things? Well, the other big thing is we're not hearing the people in the news talking. And I'll show you what I mean. This is from NPR. And NPR put out a guidance on the manifesto and the names and the New Zealand mass shooting overall. That came out on the 15th, yesterday, at 9 a.m. And on their guidance for the manifesto, this is what NPR has to talk about. Now, first of all, I agree with the first item, names. They do not want to cover or show conversation, anything that's going to be identifying the shooter. The shooter and or shooters, as there are multiple people who've been identified and are being spoken to by the police in New Zealand, those shooters or shooter, they don't want to name them. They don't want that name on NPR. I agree. And I've long held the belief We do not need to glorify these individuals, to name them, to give their names out and identify them and somehow elevate them. They don't deserve that. That's not what they're horrible human beings. We don't need to give them any kind of glory or any kind of attention. And if they're looking for 15 minutes of fame, let's deny that to them. We won't talk about them. And I agree with NPR and its guidance saying, no, we don't really need to talk about their names. We can talk about them without mentioning their names. And that's fine. I agree with that. As for the names of other individuals and family and friends, they say, well, as that comes out and as it is confirmed by authorities, then yeah, maybe they'll release those names. Although NPR wants the right to isolate and approve which names they will tell the public. There's the first problem. Okay, whether or not NPR will allow someone to report the names of the individuals who may have been affected by this mass shooting, they need that approved by a senior editor. Why? Now, I understand if it's a matter of confirmation, I agree with that. You don't want someone's name out there that is not confirmed rather than to create a panic. But in that also lies another scary thought that we've seen a lot, which is media, how can you say, the media has been moderating how they're going to approach and report a story. They tweak it, and they'll talk about certain people, not other people. They'll talk about certain aspects of any of the events, but not all of the events. They have a bias. And if that is part of the bias, that the senior editor is willing to approve releasing names of certain people, but not others, because it will somehow help a narrative that NPR wants to put out there, which on NPR is very left-leaning, to be honest, then that's scary, and that's something we should be aware of. And I don't agree with that. If we're going to release names, release all the names that are confirmed, and we can talk about them as a group, or don't. But don't pick and choose, because that's a problem. And if we start seeing NPR or other news media pick certain names specifically, then they're doing that for a narrative purpose. And that's meant to color and change the way the general public is looking at this. They're talking about video. They're not going to put video out. And most importantly, and the part that's got me, is the manifesto. They don't want to talk about the manifesto. And they want to make it limited in its distribution and in its parts that are distributed. And they must okay and review and approve that. Now, let me stop right there, because that's something that's very important. We're not trying to understand the mindset of this criminal. We're not trying to understand how they think. I don't care. I honestly could care less what the shooter or shooters in New Zealand or any of the mass shooters, I don't care what their thoughts are. It's not important. It is not important. What is important is what they did. Now, insofar as we need to understand, okay, is there a pattern that we could stop? Is there something that identifies them that helps us to protect people? Okay, I get that. That's an analysis of what they said. That's an analysis of what they've put out there. But it isn't important what they say, okay? And I know a lot of people are going crazy on it. Oh my, we've heard them say all kinds of things. I mean, there's so many articles and comments. I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about here, because, Fox News is talking about, and Ken McClinton of the TECN network, he put out, and this is what was being talked about by Fox News. And he had, conservatism is corporatism in disguise. I want no part of it. The nation with the closest political and social values to my own is the People's Republic of China. So that's one of the statements from, excuse me, that is from a reportedly 73-page manifesto. 73 pages to his manifesto. And quite honestly, the answer is, it doesn't matter. Because within that manifesto, where he's attacking Candace Owens, he's attacking President Trump, he's highlighting a Norwegian terrorist who's also committed mass murders. He points out what's the kid who attacked the church, killed 9 people. That kid, and his name has a D in it. I can't think of it right this second. These are the things that we know his manifesto highlights. But the problem is, and the point is, who cares? Okay? I don't care what he's going to do. He could attribute it to Hitler, and I would believe him, but that's not the thing. That's not the thing that's important. The thing that is important is the fact that we understand that there is an overriding theme here. He's trying to recruit people to his ideology. And we should be able to see that. And we should see and allow people to understand the depth of hate and the depth of illogic that people who do these mass shootings have. Whether it's because of a religious belief or because of a political belief or an economic belief, let's show them for being as silly and evil as it is. Hiding from the reality of the evil of what they did doesn't stop the evil. And I don't believe it promotes it either. If we put it in the proper framework. If we say, this guy is against, is he looking for the world to become more like China? I doubt it. I don't even know if he understands what that means. I don't know if that someone so deranged and willing to kill so many people, I don't know that he knows what any form of government actually is and what would be entailed in any form of this or that type of government. And I don't believe someone who's there can truly appreciate any of the people that he's talking about or any of the themes that they are putting out there. Candace Owens is not a racist. President Trump is not a racist. Okay? Dylan Root is the kid's name. He was a racist. I don't want to, and I hate using his name. I just remembered that. The North Carolina shooter of people at a church, he is a racist and a deranged killer. The New Zealand people are deranged killers. Let's identify that. The fact that he's going to say, oh, I like this type of government over that, who cares? I don't care. He's not doing this because he's trying to make the world more like China. He's not. And I'm no fan of socialism or communism ever. I denounce them. I've seen them in action. I've lived in Moscow. I've been in a Soviet system for over a year and a half, living day by day, trying to bring in capitalism into there to improve the lives of people. I've talked to people who have escaped communist nations repeatedly throughout my 50 years of life, and they've always told me the same stories about how evil communism has been. I don't mind people talking about communism if I can then say, and here's other facts, here are the realities, and here are the anecdotal stories I can add to that to tell you why that doesn't work. Because it's not wrong to question something. It's wrong to say that this is the only question you can ask or this is the only answer you can get. And that's what we see here with New Zealand. The only answer that is acceptable whenever we have one of these mass shootings is always, well, remove the weapon. Take the weapons. Take away people's freedom to be able to defend themselves for whatever reason, under whatever excuse. Take away the firearms or the knives or the guns, the cars, the box cutters. Prevent people from being able to make bombs, which, by the way, is already illegal and already has been illegal for decades, if not a century. But you take away these abilities and then you'll be safe. And that always is followed by the lie. So the first thing is let's take away people's freedom and give them a lie so they'll be okay with it. You're going to be safe because we're lying to you. No, you're not going to be safe. It's demonstrably a fact that you will not become safer by taking away more of your freedom. It does not happen. And then you go to the next step, which is if they're going to take away the freedom, they have to grow the government, and governments that grow become more and more oppressive. And so you're increasing oppression under the guise of the government will take care of you. And the government never takes care of you. The more power a government has, the less power you have. Governments cannot take care of you well. Governments don't run people's lives. They don't know how. Governments barely run governments. Name a government that doesn't have intense national debt. Not just the United States. Let's go around the world. They're all in debt. They're all mismanaged. They waste massively on simple things. Governments don't know how to run things. Governments are there to have laws, make sure those laws are enacted and enforced, and to have militaries to defend the people, and centralized currency. Those are the big primary things, to enforce contracts. These are the big things that individuals can't do themselves. And in fact, I believe it's Ben Franklin, it could be Jefferson, who said that the government should only do that which the people cannot do. Not that they're not willing to do, not that they don't want to do, not that they don't like doing, only what the people cannot do. I cannot run a military, I cannot be a military to defend the United States. We need a government for that, because New York State can't have a military to be able to defend the United States. Can't be done. We need a government. That's what the government should do. Not to tell me whether or not I need a firearm to defend my home from someone trying to break into my door. And by the way, for people who don't know this, it's anecdotal, but I'll give you an example here. I've had a situation like that. I had someone break into my house on a Saturday at 4 a.m. who was high on, we think it was PCP. He was on some drug. He broke into the home, and he was coming in to assault me and the people in the house at the time. At Saturday at 4 in the morning. And yes, I called the police, who showed up within 3 minutes. Think about every time there's been a mass shooting, any kind of serious event, when someone breaks into your home. In the first 3 minutes and probably within the first 5 minutes, because I heard the door, and obviously it was going on, it was ongoing when I called. But from the moment I called to the 3-minute mark, when 8 police cars in the Binghamton, New York area that showed up, and I thank them for that. They did a great job. I appreciate them. But when they showed up, that 3 minutes is the most dangerous time. Parkland, the first 3 minutes, most dangerous time. That's when most of the deaths happen. Why? Everyone's disoriented. No one knows exactly what's going on and what are all the details. You have panic and fear that are coming in. You have your adrenaline surging. You're trying to figure out, can you get out, or do you need to fight? That fight or flight reaction in the body is taking place, and you're trying to figure this out. This is a reality on a small scale of someone trying to break into your home. On a big scale of a mass shooting, it happens in human nature. These are the first 3 minutes. And it seems way longer than 3 minutes when you're going through it. I've been through several massive disasters of life, natural disasters and man-made disasters. And I can tell you, the first 3 minutes seem like an eternity, but it's just 3 minutes. And in those 3 minutes, you're trying to figure out a lot of stimuli, a lot of information, and trying to process it as quickly as possible and trying to react to it as quickly as possible. And it's not all possible. You can't. You can just start doing things that seem to be right and fill in the gaps as you figure out more information and what's going on. In those first 3 minutes, when that crazed, drugged individual broke down the door and got into my house. What is the answer? It's a house. It ain't going to take long to get from downstairs, front door, back door actually, and upstairs to where people are. Who luckily we all woke up. I was up at 4 a.m. I heard him. I got up. But imagine if I didn't hear him. And at 4 a.m, the first thing that I may have realized could have been waking up with this beast of a human being over my body or attacking me. Or if I did wake up, he could have killed me. This is what happens in the first 3 minutes. What do you do? And I'm saying the police are on the way. What are you doing at that moment? What are you doing in those first 3 minutes? Do you want to rely on just the government? Or do you want to be able to defend yourself? There was a church in Texas where we had a similar situation. A gentleman came into there, and notice they always target these areas where people are defenseless. Whether or not they actually do have firearms, to make sure that they don't have a firearm available, to make sure that they can't do anything. These crazed, deranged individuals always make sure they find a soft target where firearms will not be available, where there is the least likely chance of someone having a firearm. And they go into these places so that they can kill as many people as possible in the least amount of time as possible. And how would that change? How would that change if suddenly one person, like in Texas, where a crazed individual came into a church, was trying to kill everyone in the church, and if it weren't for the firearm instructor who had an AR-15 in his trunk of his car, to be able to return fire against that shooter, to drive him off from that church, and to help the police actually finally end that incident, how many people could have died by the time the police arrived 3 to 5 minutes later? Mary Brockman mentions gun-free zones are dangerous. They're not dangerous, they're deadly. Gun-free zones kill more people. More people are killed in gun-free zones, I believe, and I don't have the number. I've read the number. I don't remember at this moment, and I don't have it up to be able to present. So I will paraphrase, and I believe that gun-free zones are the location where I believe it's 90% of all mass shootings have occurred, whether it's with bombs and cars or with firearms themselves. That's where you see the most death. And you might wonder why. Because no one has a way to defend themselves. They don't have the ability to defend themselves. The more you make a person defensive, the more you make them a target to deranged and crazy people. That is just a fact. That is a reality. And Mary mentions that one of the elders at her church is a police detective. He's always armed. And I was speaking with an officer in Endicott, New York, just yesterday, actually. And I was speaking with him, and he's done the same thing for over 30 years. He carries his firearm with him, again, for the same reason. If someone extremist, insane, fanatical shows up at that church and assuming that everyone there is unarmed so that he can inflict violence and evil against them, and someone is able to protect them, until the other police officers arrive, how many lives can be saved? How many? That is a good thing. But that's not the story that you're hearing in the news. You're not hearing that the answer to, and I think it's the Prime Minister of New Zealand is saying, hey, we need to change the laws, and looking to make them more restrictive. Really? You want to make it more restrictive? People already don't have the ability to have firearms primarily in New Zealand. You're going to restrict even more of those people who cannot have a firearm, which means they're going to be more defenseless, that they're going to have less of an ability to defend their homes, their families, their lives. You're going to make them more of a target to crazy people. And that's going to be a good answer? that's going to help someone by making them a bigger target, I don't agree with that. I just don't agree with that. But as you heard the little bell, we're going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to come right back, and we're going to talk a little bit more. I'm enjoying this. I hope everyone else is too. I'm looking forward to more of your comments. Remember, you can go to the chat room and talk with us. I'm looking out for that. I'm checking on Twitter, Facebook. I'm looking at all the medium. This is about you. So speak to me, and I'll talk to you again. I'll be right back. Hey. We are back. There I am. And it's good to be back with you, everyone. Always enjoying and happy to be speaking with you here at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast, to be found on the TECN, the Exceptional Conservative Network. And we're happy to be here with you. I know we have some great other hosts of programs here, including Ken McClinton, Jeff Dunce, so many others that are on the program and on the show. And we're going to look forward to growing with you. This is our third episode here, and we're enjoying it. And I know it's a new schedule, new location. You know, what did they used to say back in the day? Well, Batman, back in the 60s, new bat time, new bat channel. Well, that's where we are. New bat time, new bat channel. We're here on the Exceptional Conservative Network, and we're enjoying it. It's a great format, and we hope everyone else is enjoying it as well. We look forward to you on chat as well. Obviously, we're talking about the issue of the very somber and serious issue of the mass shooting in New Zealand, and the fact that it's not the only one. We've seen this in, Norway's had its mass shootings. We have England that's had it. We have people who've been killed in mass events all the time. And if you were to look up the research, and it's been done before, I think the United States is about number 16 in these mass murder events. Some of them have been done with swords around the world, some of them with vehicles, some of them like France, which notably comes up to mind, where a couple times people have used cars to actually run over people rather than use a firearm, rather than use bombs, which have happened all around the world. So it's very common in all countries, big and small, that these mass shootings or mass murder events. And I think we misname this when we say mass shooting, because that assumes that, well, it's just because of firearms. No, they're mass events of murder by deranged and criminal individuals that use every form of weapon that has existed in mankind, whether they're using a sword or a bomb or a car or a firearm. And if we only isolate it as if it's only because of this one thing, well, then that we stop. If we take away that one thing, then they'll all go away. And it's a lie. That is a lie. It may make people feel good. That doesn't mean it's effective or helpful or is good. There is a big difference, massive difference. And I believe in the manifesto by the shooter or shooters that were released to the media, who have not released it. They've really suppressed this. So I don't know everything that's in there, and I'm not sure of all the sources that are saying certain things are in there. But what we believe may be one of the things in there is, at one point he goes into a diatribe talking about how, or the shooters were talking about the fact that they used a firearm as opposed to a bomb or a car or some other means of being able to kill so many people, is because the news media is so focused on the idea of a firearm. I mean, remember, we call them all mass shootings, even when it's done with a car. People will routinely, average people who aren't in the news media, other than reporters and pundits, often misname the events as saying mass shooting first. I've done it myself here, misnaming it when I'm talking about other events where someone used a bomb or a knife or a car, because we have this social thought going on that if it's a mass killing event, well, it must be with a firearm, because that's all the media tells us are about these events with firearms. And that's dangerous, because it gives the impression, it implies the thought that if you take away the firearms, that the firearms are the critical factor in these mass deaths. And that is the biggest lie you get told, because it is the criminal and deranged individual that's the cause. I mentioned before Islamberg. There were 4 boys between 16 and 20. They were in the Boy Scouts. They had acquired and had access to various firearms that they were going to use to go and kill a bunch of people in Islamberg, New York, but in an area with a high density population of Muslims. But they're also made bombs, which are already expressly illegal. And Mary mentions that both Barry Brockman is in the chat room, and she mentions that it's become a way of life. And Mary, you're right. It's not only just a way of life, but it's always been a way of life. It's just not been well reported. We didn't think about it as a community. We didn't have the instant communication of Twitter and text and Facebook and social media. And so we didn't necessarily know that the world's a dangerous place, no matter where you are in it. Because now we know that. We had an illusion before we had social media, before we had texting. We had this illusion that, well, I can go over here, this other place, and I'm safe. And the answer is no, you're not. because that other place has things too. You just didn't know about them. You didn't hear about them on a regular basis. You didn't know about that. So in your mind, it's safe because you haven't heard about it. Well, nowadays, you hear about it everywhere. And the answer is, yeah, potentially anywhere is dangerous. But does that mean that you should live a life in fear? No. You take precautions, you be aware, and you live your life. And get the government out of your life. Because the government doesn't help you with any of this. They don't make you safer. Ever. And Mary Brockman makes a great example of this. She mentions Chicago has the most restrictions anywhere in the United States. That they have the highest standards and restrictions and gun control in the United States. And already 55 people have been killed in Chicago due to firearms. And over 200 people have been shot in Chicago already. And on an annual basis, somewhere around 2,500 people per year get shot in Chicago. Several hundred people die every year in Chicago with the strongest gun laws in the nation. And that's not nearly as strong as the gun laws that are in New Zealand and most of the rest of the world, where it's even more restrictive. And yet people still get killed by firearms, by knives, by guns, by bombs. The answer is not taking away the weapon. I keep saying that, and I keep saying it in different ways, but it's very important. Because we're hearing politicians now who are piling on to this, who are making their statements. And I want to pull up something that I said on Twitter, and I was speaking to, in Twitter, one of my senators is Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. And she's running obviously for president in 2020 on the Democratic ticket for the nomination. And she had made a reply. Where is it? I'm looking for it. Here it is. Senator Gillibrand, upon hearing that the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda, that she had said that they're going to change the laws, the firearm laws and rights for people in New Zealand. And, you heard it was Senator Kirsten Gillibrand who said, that sounds like a great idea. Let's change the laws and become more restrictive. And so my response to her 17 hours ago was, you realize that New Zealand is more restrictive on firearm policy than Chicago, the most numerous and restrictive gun laws in the nation. All those restrictions, again, like in Chicago, can't stop deranged, evil, and or criminal people from doing bad things. Stop using evil to push a political agenda. And you can see that on my Twitter page at the MVOS Consult. And I'd be happy to comment on it if you wish. But the fact is, we're looking at this the wrong way. And we are becoming more restrictive. And we are falling into many of these events are building a narrative being pushed by some pundits, some politicians that seek to deny you freedom. And I would ask everyone, since the SAFE Act, since 2013, New York has had the New York SAFE Act. Since throughout the nation over the last, since 1999, red flag legislation has existed in Connecticut and Indiana, and it's spread throughout 8 or 9 states now in the nation. Has anyone become safer? Does anyone actually look at the numbers? Because the answer is no. The numbers of gun violence and mass shootings have stayed exactly the same. It's not that we haven't had more laws. It's not that we haven't made schools, some schools, harder targets, some of them. It's not that we've taken away more firearms from people than perhaps the most we've ever seen in the history of our nation. In Florida, in the first 4 months of them passing a red flag legislation, which allows people to be denied their due process and to strip them of their property, we saw that over 450 people in just the first 4 months had their firearms removed from them. That was reported by, I believe it was the Sun Sentinel last year in June. And you have to say to yourself, okay, if they've done that, did anyone get safer? Did they stop the shootings? Or not mass shootings, but shootings? No. Remember President Obama during his term enacted 32 new gun control legislation and expressly for the fact of making the nation safer. That's exactly what he said to everyone. Vice President Joe Biden came out and said, hey, this is, we worked with a coalition to make these 32 regulations that will make people safer. And a week after they put out that executive order with those 32 regulations, there was the shipyard mass shooting that took place. It didn't work. It didn't make anyone safer. It hasn't made anyone safer since. You cannot regulate yourself out of this. And by deluding ourselves into believing we can, we endanger lives. When I was talking at CPAC, and I was talking to Marissa Hamilton out of Arizona, the Arizona Republican Liberty Caucus, and we were talking about women, and I had to ask her, does it make you safer that you would have to wait 30 days to be able to get a firearm to protect yourself from someone who potentially may be trying to rape you or to assault you? And she's been through these kind of events. The answer is no. I've asked many women, both political and non-political, how does that make you safer? If you believe that you may be a victim of domestic abuse and or rape or violence, how does this make you safer knowing that you have to wait an extended period of time because someone else isn't comfortable with the idea that you could own a firearm? I mean, let's think about it. We have extended, and there's laws and legislation across the country that extend the amount of time by weeks, if not months, on allowing people to be able to get a firearm. Legally, individuals who are law-abiding citizens that have broken no law and have no reason to be restricted are being restricted of their right that exists in the Constitution because someone is more comfortable, and this is the reality here. It's going to sound horrible, but it's true. They're more comfortable with allowing someone to be raped or murdered than they are comfortable with the idea of someone owning a firearm to defend themselves. Is that scary? I ask you that, Mary. Does that scare you? Whether you're a woman or a man, it should terrify people that there are people who are more scared of a inanimate object, a hunk of metal, than they are about violence against other human beings. I know. I'm not saying that you fear anything, Mary. Mary's on our chat, in our chat room if you've missed it, but I'm not saying that you fear anything. I'm saying that there are some people out there. I can't speak to who that would be. I don't know Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I don't know Senator Kirsten Gillibrand or Senator Cory Booker or Senator Kamala Harris. I know that their legislation seems to imply that they are more afraid of someone having a type of firearm that has appeared in a movie than they are about the physical and real impact of American citizens being raped and murdered. Okay, Mary, that sounds fine. So I'm really terrified of that. That upsets me. That upsets me. And no one has talked about this. Matter of fact, I'm glad I'm bringing it up, and I'm going to remember this. It's insane that we are promoting this idea that people are more afraid of an inanimate object than actual physical violence that actually happens. And instead of telling people, hey, get yourself an inanimate object to protect yourself from those people who may threaten you, we're saying, well, no, we're going to take away your right so you can be even more of a victim, that you can be even more in danger, that you can have even less freedom. Does that make any sense? I mean, if the news media were to accurately say this as it exists, as it really has been happening, and were to say to people, hey, guess what? We're going to take away your ability to protect yourself. We're going to go out there and we're going to make you a bigger victim. We're going to paint a big target on your back and make you less capable of being able to defend yourself and your property and your family. And we're going to enable criminals and deranged to inflict more harm by these laws. Would you support that? I don't think anyone would ever say that. And I think someone, and I know I'm a small part of the news media, but I would love to see CNN or NBC to go out there and actually put a poll. And instead of saying, hey, we want to stop you from being, do you want to stop people from having guns? Instead say the consequence of this and say, we want to increase the ability for you to be able to be harmed without defending yourself. See how many people would say yes to that. See how many people would say yes to the consequence of the laws that they are speaking about. Why doesn't anyone ever do that? Why don't we ever see a poll that says, here's the direct consequence of the law. Do you support this? And I guarantee you the numbers will not be the same. If you tell people what the consequence is, they will not support that, which is why you get lied to. And that's what I take from the New Zealand shooting. We are being lied to directly as a consequence of this to obscure the reality of what's going on. The more we are taking away the ability of people to be able to defend themselves in their lives, the more we are giving people the ability to die, to be injured, to be a victim. And I don't agree with that. I have never agreed with that, which is why I have been a very outspoken advocate of the Second Amendment for decades. And I will be, and I will continue to be, because it is important. I've spent a lot of this episode and this show talking about the Second Amendment. I didn't intend to. Like I said, I wanted to talk about Beto O'Rourke. I wanted to talk about some of the bills that are in Congress that we're seeing there. We wanted to talk about the influence of the far left on the 2020 election, the idea of identity and gender politics and how it's destroying our nation and separating people and taking them into categories. But instead, we have to talk about what's happening in New Zealand, not because it's not important, it is, but because it's so irrational, the logic that goes behind the answer. Every time there is these kinds of events, we get knee-jerk answers like that I read from Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, where on Twitter, where they're going to this extreme without any consideration of the consequences of their actions, without any consideration of how this is going to negatively impact people's lives. And that really, really scares me. And that's why I'm spending so much time on it in this episode, and why I'm looking forward to hearing your comments. And if you think I'm wrong, as always, please tell me. If you think I am wrong, tell me I got this wrong. I missed the law. I don't understand what's going on. I don't see that the reason why we're seeing more and more sanctuary cities for Second Amendment rights and counties that are doing that is because people are recognizing more of what I'm talking about. The consequences of these laws is detrimental to the well-being of people in the United States, if not around the world. And if I'm misunderstanding that, if I'm getting that wrong, if that's not the case, please tell me. If you think there's a reason, a good justifiable reason, that in taking away people's ability to own a firearm, that it's somehow going to make people safer, please tell me what that evidence is. Please tell me how that is the case. Because in doing the research, I have yet to find that. I don't see it. I see people are better off having more rights and more freedom than if you take it away. Mary Brockman says, I believe that, from the chat room, and she says, I believe everyone should have the ability to protect themselves by any means necessary. I'm pretty much with you there, Mary. You know, I believe that everyone should have. I'm a near absolutist when it comes to rights. Now, when a lot of people may not be familiar with what that means, it's a way of describing a viewpoint, a legal viewpoint on the Constitution. So when you're an absolutist, there, in terms of the First Amendment, you can say absolutely anything, and there is no restriction on it. You can be hateful, you can incite violence, you can do anything if you have an absolutist view. Any and all language is allowed. I am nearly an absolutist. I believe other than insightful words that would incite violence, words that would promote violence, those are not words that are protected by the Second Amendment. If you say something, as long as you're saying something that is truthful, something that is verifiable, as long as you're saying something that is an opinion and you are not trying to harm others, say whatever you want. That's why I'm here. And that's why I invite you, the public, to be able to speak and answer me. As long as we can have a dialogue, we can move things forward. And what we need to do is have more dialogue and move things forward, not to restrict people from being able to say anything. That helps no one. I don't want to restrict you from being able to speak. I want you to speak. But there are those who don't agree with that, and they want people to have less freedom to speak. That's where the whole PC movement, politically correct movement, comes from. It's the ability to stop people from speaking, and that's a problem because you're controlling people's thoughts and you're controlling the way people think and believe and act when you control the way they speak, and I'm against that. That plays directly into the Second Amendment. It's the same mindset, the same thought. I am a near absolutist. I believe that the Second Amendment does it. It allows you to have virtually everything. Can you have a Moab, mother of all bombs? No. Can you have a tank? Technically, yes. And guess what? That's already legal. You can own a tank if you have the proper license. You can actually own an assault weapon. By the way, let's get it right. An assault weapon is a machine gun. It's not a semi-automatic rifle. They're not the same, not by any stretch of anything. The science alone is very specific on how it functions. The engineering is different. There is an automatic weapon, and then there is a semi-automatic weapon. They are not the same. They don't do the same things. And to confuse the two means you have no idea what you're talking about. But so I believe people should be able to have that. Have that near perfect, you don't get a nuclear bomb, but if you want a Ruger Mini 4, a Mini 14 Ruger, then go right ahead because you should be able to have that. When we take away people's those rights, that's when we get people hurt and harmed. But we got a lot of comments now, so let's see here. Hate speech. From the chat room, hate speech is protected by the First Amendment. A fist is an assault weapon, so is a stick or a knife. And you're right. You are absolutely right. Anything that is used to assault someone is an assault weapon in that sense. An assault firearm is a machine gun. There is a difference. But we have seen this move because of political correctness. People are trying to rename things and give them new attributes that don't actually exist. Again, they feel like that's right. It has nothing to do with facts. This is the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez school dictionary. You're just redistributing. Some people redistribute and reattribute various things, in particular firearms. So a semi-automatic rifle becomes an assault weapon, which is an automatic weapon, which is incorrect. Things like sticks, knives, and fists, which if used to assault someone, they're not assault weapons. Well, they are by definition. So people don't understand because of the media, because of social media, because of memes, they misunderstand the meanings of these words, and that's dangerous. And then that when you misunderstand the meanings of words because people are manipulating the words, which goes to the First Amendment, that's when you're in danger. That's why we have the First Amendment, freedom of speech, which is backed up by the freedom of us to defend ourselves from a government that would misuse the words, misrepresent things, and damage us. That's a very powerful part of the segment right there. I hope people will listen to that, take a clip of this and use that. We have the First Amendment backed up by the Second Amendment so that we are able to protect ourselves from a government misusing its power and redefining words and meanings for the advantage of the government against the people. That's why we have a freedom to speak, and that's why we have a freedom to defend ourselves, so that the government can't misuse its power, misrepresent words, meanings, phrases, ideas, and turn that against the public by taking away their freedom. That is massive. Hello, Ken McClinton himself. Mr. TECN himself mentioned the Prime Minister of New Zealand are reactionaries that are using tragedy to promote a manufactured crisis and take away the rights of people to defend themselves. Yeah, I agree. And we see it all the time. As I was mentioning before, we see this constantly. They're using the fear, the impression, this misguided wording to make people afraid of being able to defend themselves. But the reality is, the more we allow people to defend themselves, the less likely these things are going to happen. That's why we have 90% of the gun-free zones are the location where 90% of all mass events happen. And I don't even want to call them mass shootings. I want to call them mass events, because when a guy plows through, I believe it was Nice, France, and kills people and assaults dozens of people with a vehicle, then you're not looking at something that's being done because he's just using an assault weapon. He's still using a vehicle. You want to call it an assault vehicle? Sure, go right ahead. It's not a tank, but yet people are being harmed. So when you do this, it's always a problem. Always a problem. And that's dangerous. Very, very dangerous. And I also see Howie Coleman has joined in. Hello, Howie. Good to see you there, too. A lot of people coming into the chat. It's always good. Actually, you guys came in just as I was going to take a quick break here. We've got about half an hour left. And I want to take a quick break. And then I'm going to come right back. And let's talk about the First Amendment and the relation with the Second Amendment. No one ever really does that. We always hear about, well, they're always separate things, and we hear about how people want to take away one right, but they don't look at how does that affect the other rights. And let's actually have a conversation about that, because we need to. Because obviously the media doesn't want to, and that makes a big difference. And Howie Coleman mentions, this country went to war to defend our right to defend ourselves. As we should. I agree. I agree. Hi, Howie. But as I said, you called me just as we're about to take a quick break. So give me a second. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back, and we'll jump right into that.
Every superstition the way.
Hello, everybody, and we're back again. That's right. This is No Soundbites Allowed, brought to you on the Exceptional Conservative Network, the TECN. And I'm happy to be here with you. And I'm with the chat room as well. We're having a great conversation. We're talking about a lot of aspects of the New Zealand shooting, the massacre there. And obviously, we denounce it, as we have been throughout the entire show, in case anyone wasn't catching that. Sometimes people seem to think in news media, if you haven't actually said, I denounce it, then you don't denounce it. Well, let's be very clear there. For anyone who may have that misunderstanding, we denounce it. We denounce any kind of violence of that nature against innocents. No one should ever do that. Evil, deranged individuals, criminals have done that, and that is wrong, and we have to denounce that strongly and solidly. And if anyone thought that at any point in our conversation today that we're not denouncing it, I want to dispel that right now. But let's also look at the impact of this, because this is very important. This affects all of our lives. That's why we have this conversation for 2 hours, talking directly with you, the public, so that you can have that feedback, because your thoughts are as important, matter of fact, more important than anything that any pundit or politician will say. Because politicians very often have an agenda. And you can even assign that to many people in the news media, MSNBC, CNN. We can say they have very strong left-leaning agendas. And you can say, well, Mike, you're a Republican conservative, and you're a pundit, and you're very open about being on the right, and you're right. But that doesn't mean we can't have a conversation. And it makes it even more important that we have a conversation with you, the public, because you make the difference. In America, you are the vote. You are the one who decides what the government can and cannot do, what rights we have and what we do not. Something that often is missed in this conversation is when we hear governments and people like in New Zealand, they don't have the freedom that we have here in the United States. So when the Prime Minister in New Zealand says that New Zealand will change their gun laws and become more restrictive, well, that's a problem. But that's something they don't have the right. They don't have the innate, inalienable right to a firearm to protect themselves and their family, not only from the deranged and the criminal, but from a government that has bad intentions. We do. And we see that even as governments try to become more and more oppressive, like in Chicago, like in California, like in New York, where we see law after law after law that is repressive against the people who are law-abiding citizens. That's 99.999%, literally 99.999% of all legal gun owners, 160 million people in the United States. It has no impact because it isn't addressing the problem. It isn't addressing criminals and the deranged. Those are the people that we should be worried about, and those should be the people we're trying to address, not legal gun owners. And that brings me to a conclusion that the only reason why they do this is because it's taking away rights from legal citizens, legal gun owners, every American. It gives the government more power. And that is a problem because it's power the government doesn't have. Every law is just another freedom that is taken away from us. And that must be balanced with the rights that we have. Are we getting an adequate mix of here's my freedom? Is that improving the quality of life and safety of life for every single American? And if we are not improving it for everyone, then that is a bad law and we shouldn't do it. That is my opinion. That's the opinion of the founders of the Constitution and the nation. Government should not have more power than the people. And the government should only have the powers that the people are willing to give. We only should have a government that can do what we can't, as I mentioned earlier in the program. So I do want to get into that a little bit. But we have some comments from the chat room, and of course they're mentioning a few things. And I want to go back to some of the things that were said before the break. One of the big things that was being said here is Howie Coleman mentions, what do you think, where was it? Sorry. Lost track. I'm so many ideas and so many thoughts. Where was it? You had mentioned something, Howie. Overreaction. That's it. Howie mentioned this country went to war to defend our right to defend ourselves. And that's an important thing. That's a really important thing. And recently, we heard Mary mentioned as well, inalienable rights come from God. Absolutely. Our rights are absolute. Absolute. And but we can make the agreement to limit that to a certain extent in the sense that, okay, you don't get to have a nuclear bomb. We can agree on that because that's dangerous. That is beyond the scope of being able to defend yourself because it affects so many others. But when we start hearing people manipulate these situations and use them against us to take away our freedoms, it doesn't stop at just the one thing. When we hear, people like Senator Kirsten Gillibrand saying that being more restrictive and taking away more people's freedom to be able to have and bear a firearm to protect their homes and protect themselves in gun-free zones that draw these criminals, these deranged individuals like honey to flies. When we see them saying that no, people need to have more restrictions, when we see red flag legislation where someone can have their property, which is the Fourth Amendment, stripped away from them by the government without ever having due diligence beforehand, without ever having committed a crime, that's a problem. That's a massive problem. Because now, again, it's the Second Amendment. We're going to make you safe. Except it isn't making you safe. It takes a firearm away from a legal, law-abiding citizen based on someone's their feeling, without a crime ever being committed, and it doesn't make anyone safer. Because criminals still break the law. By definition, that's why they're criminals. They break the law. They're out there to break those laws, to take advantage of individuals and to harm them, whether it's physical, economic, or otherwise. And that's dangerous. So when we see people taking on the Second Amendment, they're not just taking on the Second Amendment. They're taking on all of our rights. Red flag legislation directly affects your Fourth Amendment right because it takes your property without you ever committing a crime because someone had a feeling. It takes away your right to a family because it will take away your children as a direct consequence because someone had a feeling. It takes away your Fifth Amendment right. Your Fifth Amendment right to be duly charged and to face your accusers and to be able to defend yourself in a court of law because there is no crime that's been committed. And it's after the fact, after the government has taken your property, then you get to defend yourself. That's not due process. That's after the fact. You've already been penalized. You've already been punished. That's what a red flag is. Punishment without a crime based on someone's feelings. How is that right? But it's couched in this idea that, well, you're going to be safer, except you're demonstrably not. Look at the the FBI United Crime Report for 2017. It will tell you right there, no, you're not safer. That report is all the shootings and stabbings and vehicles, all the murders in the United States, state by state. And you don't get safer because they have more gun violence, gun control laws. Look at Chicago, Illinois is a great example. California, New York State. It doesn't work. But they're using the Second Amendment to take away your Fourth Amendment and your Fifth and your 15th Amendment rights. That's dangerous. And it's also affecting your First Amendment right. Because someone, based on their feeling of what you said, can take away your firearms and your family. That's a dangerous place. We have members of Congress right now who are in office, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and many of the Democratic socialists that are taking over the Democratic Party on a local and national level, that completely believe that someone's feelings are more important than their actual facts. That's devastating, because feelings are transitory. They're not real. And that's a problem. And that's a problem, because your emotional, you can be manipulated on your emotions. And we see this happen on a regular basis every day. Whenever you see a headline that's out there, Trump hates women, that's an emotional, that's not fact-based. He didn't say he hates women, or he hates anyone for that matter. But that headline sets an emotion in play. You're being manipulated. And when you have that manipulation, it then changes and colors everything else after that. And that's a problem, especially when that is being used to take away your rights. When you boil it down, and if you read the articles and you actually read the wording, you're listening to someone say, and you shouldn't have the right to do this, which means you shouldn't have the freedom to do this, which means you have less power to control your own life, and the government should have it. And governments are never right on social issues. Governments are never right on individual basis. The government doesn't understand individual lives. It can't. It's not built for that. It's not that kind of creature. It doesn't have that understanding. No government does. I don't care if you want to be a socialist or not, it doesn't do it any better. It's the same oppression. Matter of fact, it's more oppression. And if you don't believe me, ask any person who has left a socialist nation to come to the United States. Look at the numbers of people who are leaving socialist and communist nations to come to the United States. I recently did an interview with Lily Tang Williams. Ask Lily, who was born in communist China and lived there for 24 years before she got a chance to come to the United States, and is one of the biggest Second Amendment advocates I have ever seen. Ask her what she thinks of communism and socialism and the repression of people's rights. And I guarantee you, you're going to get a very different answer than what this beautiful image of freedom is. And that's the thing we need to keep in mind. Because when you take away someone's right, you don't take away one thing. You're taking away many things. These things are interconnected. We have the Second Amendment to protect our First Amendment, the ability to speak. Because in many nations across the world, I'll use an example. You can go to North Korea or you can go to Venezuela. Either one. They're both the same thing. If you go to look at those nations, guess what? You're not free to say what you want about the government. There is a group of people, whether it's corrupt police or it's the government itself, that will go out and shoot you and kill you dead just because you said something against the government. You don't get to do that in the United States. You get to protest. Antifa, terrorists that they are, they show up at events. They're not arrested instantly because they're saying they don't agree with the government. Black Lives Matters, Citizen Action, political leaders of tomorrow. These are just a couple of the big fringe left groups that believe that I should not be able to have this conversation with you, the public, right now. They would rather restrict and deny me the ability to have a conversation with you because they don't like what I have to say. And that's terrifying because it doesn't take away that just one right. In silencing, when we see Google and Facebook and Twitter admit that they have algorithms that suppress conservative and Republican thought, that they are controlling the way people think and manipulating the way people can find information, that's not just depriving your First Amendment right. It deprives you of all your rights. It diminishes you as a human being. It denies you the ability to be creative and to think and to understand and comprehend. It denies you the ability to act in your own best interest and the interest of your nation. That is dangerous. Not only is that control, that's subjugation. And it's not just because it's the First Amendment. It's everything else. If they control what you can learn about what's happening, if they can deny people from being able to speak and have a difference of opinion and have a conversation about that, which is what we're supposed to have in our government. We come to a consensus of thought to pass the best laws that help the most people, not to help this particular special interest group or that special interest group, which is what we see now. And that's by Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, libertarians. Everybody has their special interest group, which is even more emphasized by the identity and gender politics, which puts people into smaller and smaller groups in smaller and smaller categories. And you only exist within that category. You're not an individual. According to gender and identity politics, I am a male, I'm black, I'm Hispanic, I'm middle class, I'm educated, but I'm also a conservative and a Republican. And those things all exist separate of each other. They're not one thing. Mike is a commentator, a Republican conservative political commentator who's been alive for 50 years, has lived in Moscow and lived in the United States on both coasts and has traveled and been part of the Marines. No, that's not me. It's the certain parts of me. And they consider that the whole thing. You aren't you. You are only these components. And those components are only important on the day and for the time that they want to do something. And that's dangerous. And that's what we get when we start saying, well, you can remove someone's right for the Second Amendment. You're saying, well, it's okay to take away their rights from everything else. If we can suppress someone talking about the Second Amendment and saying how important it is, well, we can suppress and destroy someone's ability to have thought and to act on that thought and in their best interest, which means you're affecting the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Third Amendment, the Fifth, the 15th, the 22nd, the 20th, all of them. You're affecting every aspect of someone's life. And if you're saying that you can only have a certain thought because if you're black, you can only fit in this box, you can only be this thing. And I don't care what you want to call that thing. If you're calling it, you have to be a Democrat, or you have to be a member of Black Lives Matter, or you have to be a member of Plot, or you have to be whatever. You are totally you're destroying the individuality of every single person, and you're destroying the ability of that person to create, understand, and comprehend and act. And that is absolutely dangerous. That's devastating. That is deadly. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I don't believe that's what is intended. But let me take a pause here because I want to mention we have a lot of comments from, we have a few comments from the chat room. One of them is, let me see here. When Washington was asked to be king, he refused. The founding fathers emphasized we, the people, not we, the few in power. And I agree with that. Another comment, while white Democrats will give me a civil right to make certain that we are equal when all is said and done, although I never leave the ghetto and they live in a penthouse in Manhattan. Well, yeah, there's the dichotomy of that. And I'll give you a great example. And this is a fact that happened here in my part of New York, in the Southern Tier. We have, obviously, city council elections are this year, 2019. And we have a candidate, one of the candidates, a young man, Conrad Taylor, who I've met and I've interviewed before. He was 18 when he got elected. 18. And he's a member of the city council. He's a student. He lives here in the region most of the time. And he's a member of the far left. He's part of Citizen Action, that going towards that fringe. And this year was supposed to be his year for re-election. He had the ability to go for re-election. He chose not to, or depending on who you speak to and what source, there is some hearsay here, he was forced out because the political leaders of tomorrow are going with an all black or all women of color, women in color, identity politics. Conrad happens to be a white male. Conrad has apologized publicly for being a white male and his white privilege. And in the face of that, and now Conrad has a mixed record, is a member, elected official, and some people like him, some people don't. I'm not questioning that. But here's the thing. if Conrad, who has experience now for 4 years in government, has done some good things and some not so great things as an elected official, and if his main reason why he cannot run again is because of his skin color, then there is a problem in our nation. He is not being challenged or being replaced because he was ineffective. He's being replaced because there is an agenda that says all white men are evil and a woman of color is good intrinsically, and so he has to be replaced. How does that benefit anyone? There is nothing intrinsic about someone's skin color. There is nothing that's intrinsically good or bad about someone's gender. And that some politician is being replaced merely because of a box that he fits into that isn't advantageous politically right now does not mean that he's a bad politician or that the public is going to be any better off by replacing them. And when we say that politics is based on, when we see these identity-based politics that says, well, this person is better than that person for politics because they fit these boxes, that's a problem because that has nothing to do with the intrinsic value of the individuals involved. And I'm saying this about Conrad Taylor. He's a Democrat. He's a far left Democrat. And I am upset for him about what happened to him. And it's not because I think I want to see him, I don't agree with his politics. I don't agree with apologizing because you were born. I don't agree with saying that someone is better or worse because they're white or black or whatever. I don't care about that. But I can't stand the idea that someone who has qualifications, he's been elected, he's been in office, and I have a problem that that person is being shoved out because they don't fill the right box. No one can be benefiting because of that. So I stand up for the right of that Democrat, that far left Democrat, to be in office because he deserves something better. If people want to challenge him, go right ahead, but don't force him out. And you shouldn't challenge him just because he doesn't hit enough boxes. That's not freedom. That is the antithesis of freedom. That's killing freedom. Because I guarantee you, no matter what box you may have today, tomorrow there's a box that's going to be more important than yours. If women are important today, tomorrow it'll be a trans woman, or to be someone who's gay, or to be something else. And that box will be moved, and you're no longer important. And then what happens? Conrad was very important to the left because he was young. He was a student, and he was young. And so they put him in. They ran him, and he ran a good race, getting all the student votes. And now the politics say, well, a white student isn't important enough, but a black woman is, so they'll put them in. How is that helping anyone? That's just terrifying. Mary mentions that Conrad is stupid for apologizing. I told him that directly, on air, in the recording. And we also got the comment from the chat room, we don't need snowflakes in D.C. I agree. I don't think anyone, any politician, if they have ever said that they apologize for being born, whether they're being born white, black, Hispanic, Asian, whether they are apologizing because they're male or female, or they're gay, or they're trans. If you're apologizing for being in existence, the problem is not with anyone else. It starts with you. You should never apologize for what you are. You should never apologize for being born. You should never apologize because someone doesn't like what you are, or they think better, they know what you are. I have heard every kind of comment that people have said because I'm a black Republican, because I'm a Hispanic Republican, and they throw a book of names at us. You know what? They have a problem. I'm okay with my choices and the fact that I can make that choice. And just like with the Second Amendment, I defend our ability to be able to make choices. No one gets to take it away from us. And with that, I'm out of time today. And I thank you all for being here. and joining us on the TECN network. I look forward to all of your comments, and I want everybody, think about what I just said. Send me the comments, whether you agree with me, you disagree, you think I missed something. It's the only way I can learn. It's the only way we can all get better. So let us know, and I'll talk to you all again very, very soon. I love you all, and I'll talk to you again soon. Oh, by the way, nope, I almost missed it. I'm on Tuesday and Thursdays at 1 p.m., on Saturday, 12 noon till 2. You can get in touch with us at my website, mvoss.com, as you can see across the screen. Don't forget the other great shows here with Howie, with Ken. Everybody, we love you, and we'll talk to you again soon. I got to go. I'm over time. All right, thanks.